In today's lesson, we'll be learning how to manipulate formulas. As you can see, we have a yellow rectangle. Its length is 4 meters, while its width is 2 meters. How would you find the area of a rectangle? If you recall, the formula for area of a rectangle is length times width. You'll notice that there is no multiplication sign between these two variables. When there are two variables side by side with no operation, you can assume it to be multiplication. To find the area of this rectangle, all I need to do is take the length and multiply it by the width. So 4 times 2 gives you 8 meters squared. Therefore, the area of this rectangle is 8 meters squared. Now, what if I gave you the same yellow rectangle, but this time I gave you its area and its length, and I wanted you to find its width? How would you do this? Would you use the formula of length times width, or would you use mental math? Well, many of you might opt to use mental math, thinking that 4 multiplied by some number will give us 8, and many of you would have guessed 2. You can use mental math in this situation since the numbers are fairly small and area is something that you've done before. But what happens if the numbers aren't so friendly? There's an alternative method to guess and check, and we'll be talking about this method soon. As you can see, we have a yellow rectangular prism. We know its length, its width, and its height. I want to know the volume of this yellow rectangular prism. If you recall, the equation for volume is length times width times height. Again, you'll notice that there is no multiplication sign between these variables. Remember, if there is no operation between variables which are side by side, that just means that there's actually multiplication there. To find the volume, I'm going to take 5, I'm going to multiply it by 2, and then I'm going to multiply it by 3. And this is going to be equal to 30 meters cubed. Therefore, the volume of this rectangular prism is 30 meters cubed. What happens if I give you the same yellow rectangular prism, but this time I give you its volume, its length, and its width, and I want you to find its height? How would you do this? Would you use the formula of length times width times height? Or would you use guess and check? Many of you may opt to use guess and check, thinking that 5 multiplied by 2, then multiplied by some number, must give us 30. Then using mental math, you may have come up with the number 3. Now this situation is a little bit more complicated than our yellow rectangle. But again, the numbers were fairly small and the situation is familiar since we've done volume before. But what happens if the situation gets more complicated? What if these numbers aren't so friendly? There must be a better way. And there is. And I'll be showing you this strategy in these lessons. This strategy is based on the order of operations, which you know as BEDMAS. B represents brackets, E represents exponents, D represents division, M represents multiplication, A represents addition, and S represents subtraction. I now want you to think of their opposites. Well, brackets really isn't an operation, so there's nothing to say over here. The opposite of an exponent is something called a root. You're most familiar with a square root. The opposite of division is multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. The opposite of addition is subtraction. And the opposite of subtraction is addition. I want you to keep this in mind in the next few lessons.